I'm a first gen college student, and I knew from a very young age that I wanted to do something in the biology realm. It spoke to me. And at first I thought I wanted to be a marine biologist, but then I learned that not all marine biologists got to work with the Shamu and Namu at SeaWorld, and so I started to explore other options. I did my first 2 years at a community college where I learned what it would be like to be a medical laboratory technologist who works in the medical laboratories doing testing that's behind all of the diagnostics that we use in the clinic. And so I was a junior in college before I met my first card carrying research scientist. And my family and everyone thought, well, you're biologically oriented, you like sciences, you're going to be a physician. So it was always this assumption that I was going to go to medical school. And so when I met my first research scientist, I knew that was what I wanted to do. Medicine didn't call to me in the same way that that did. And so I made the decision at that point to pursue a career in research of some sort, and was fortunate to get into a graduate program that allowed me at the time to do rotations, much like our students do now, to find the type of work that I wanted to do. I trained in graduate school first as a virologist and then as a cancer biologist, and I've spent the full length of my career working in the area of cancer biology. And I think one of the hardest things that I did was I trained as a cell signaling cancer biologist who worked predominantly with cells in a dish and studied how cells communicate with one another and how signals are transmitted within the cells. And as a part of our studies, we did an unbiased proteomic screen to look for the molecular target of a drug. And I expected we would get a transcription factor or a kinase or something that as a cell signaler I would know what to do with. And instead we hit an inflammatory cytokine. So as an early / mid-career scientist, I got pulled in the direction of tumor immunology. And so one of the hardest things I did was to kind of retrain myself at that point in my career to have enough familiarity with the field of immunology to be able to do this research successfully. And it was a challenge. So I'm always really grateful for the fact that our current students have the opportunity to take a class later in their graduate career if their project takes a turn that will allow them to explore a new area, and they don't have to try to do that all on their own. They can do it through a classroom experience where they can spend 6 weeks learning a little bit about a topic without having to make a lifetime investment in it. So that transition was very hard and difficult, but ultimately successful. And we did a lot of science that I'm very proud of in that space between the cancer cell and the immune system, and how the two interact and communicate. As you may know, 2 years ago I gave up my lab to focus on my administrative responsibilities as the associate or assistant dean at the time and associate dean now. And that was a difficult transition. I had spent the entire first 20 years of my career, I guess, being a scientist, and I gave that up in favor of the job that I have now, which I love. Much of that was driven by my desire to enhance the training of our students, and I knew that within my own research lab, I could train 2 or 3 students at a time for the time that I was in the program, but now I have the opportunity to touch the lives of 300 students at any given time. And so even though it was very difficult to give up my research lab, the transition has been a blessing, and one that I'm very grateful for. So many of the students here may not know this, but I was actually in graduate school for 8 years, because I started working in a virology lab, and when I was in my 4th year, the investigator that I was working with decided to leave the institution. And I elected not to move with him, but instead to move into another laboratory where I finished my graduate work and then continued to work with that new investigator. And so that was another difficult transition where I kind of stepped out of the virology world and into the cancer biology world. Sort of started my PhD over again, but clearly with a lot more experience and skills and energy to bring to the new project. And while it was a difficult transition, it was also a terrific decision. So what I can say with some certainty is that while I've had several difficult transitions over the course of my career, every one of them has put me in a really terrific place, including the recent one into the associate dean position that I took on in June of 2020. Yeah, so I think that focusing in on childcare is a really important aspect of this. Obviously, there's a lot of information coming out in the literature that tries to get at the root causes for why the pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on our female scientists. The information is out there. The numbers don't lie. Getting at the root causes of that's a little more difficult, but I do think that childcare is a huge part of it. I think most of our students know that the university has a parental accommodation policy for individuals who have a child or who adopt a child or who become responsible for a child while they're a graduate student. It guarantees both parents 8 weeks of consecutive leave in the event of that kind of life change. But I think that one of the things that struck me more recently is the NIH releasing the policies on providing child care support for parents who have NRSAs or who are on institutional training grants. So the NIH has recognized that child care is burdensome for trainees doing research, and so anyone who has an NRSA individual or institutional training grant position can apply for support for childcare. And so I think that is one step in the right direction of the scientific community recognizing that childcare is a tremendous expense. It's a tremendous expense for everyone in society, but trying to take a step towards addressing it for trainees who are pursuing careers in research. So I think that's a huge step. So it sounds a little trite, but I think it's, follow your dreams, right? So as I said earlier, we all face challenges and adversity, and I think the more you can focus your energy on recognizing that you have a destination that you're hoping to reach, and your job for right now is to figure out how to overcome those hurdles and not let people or nature or your experiments stand in your way of that dream. So reach out for help, build a mentor network that will allow you to discuss all of the different facets of things that are difficult or challenging. All of you have research mentors, but it's really difficult to expect that one person to be your go-to for everything. And so find someone who who resonates with you on the other topics that are important to you in your life, whether it's your hobbies or your career goals or whatever facet is important to you. Find the right people to talk about those things with. Don't feel like you have to do this alone. There are teams of people around who are ready, willing, and able to be helpful. And I think that recognizing that early and often is really important. Finding your people, and not only people that are older and wiser or more experienced, but your peers, right? Who's your support team? Who's going to be there when your experiments are going badly? Who do you want to surround yourself with to help you get through those times of challenge? Because they will come. If they haven't already, they will come, and you can't do this alone. You can't do your science alone, and you can't do your career alone. So take advantage of the resources that are available. Many of our students are reluctant to talk to faculty about things, but I often will tell trainees that all of us are here because we want to interact with students. We could be making a lot more money and doing interesting things, working in other places, but we choose to be here in part because we love working with students and other trainees. And so take advantage of the fact that you're surrounded by people who are here because they want to interact with you, and find that team that's going to be there for you when those challenges arise, and that's going to be there to celebrate the victories, which is equally important. We often forget to celebrate the victory. So I think reflecting back on my last answer and not only seeking our own mentoring team, but realizing that we have an obligation and an opportunity to be part of the mentoring teams of those around us. Mentors don't necessarily have to be people that are further ahead or more experienced. They can be the people that surround us every day. Because the chances that when you're having a bad day, someone else is having a good day and can help you navigate that are high. And so, um, being part of those teams and surrounding not only our female students and faculty, but our, everyone needs a mentoring team. So finding and being a part of that community, I think, is really important. It is very easy, no matter who you are, to get very focused on your project and your experiments and what do I have to do today to do this, and it can come at the expense of the outside world, and no one can do this alone. And so building that team and being part of that team for others, I think, is the best advice we can give every member of our scientific community.